My brother-in-law moved in after his latest breakup, swearing it'd only be for a week. At first, I believed him. I even felt sorry for him. But within days, he was eating my food, inviting over his buddies for poker night, and telling me to relax in my own kitchen. My partner said, he just needs space. But I watched as Jake took over mine. So I came up with a plan, because I'd spent too long being polite in a house that was supposed to be mine. And when I finally snapped, nobody saw it coming. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I've always been the kind of man, so had everyone. But nobody was giving me a free pass to treat other people's homes like crash pads. By day 6, he had friends over. Not a party, yet, but just enough to shift the energy. They drank beer, laughed loud, played something on the PS5 until the walls vibrated. I walked into the kitchen and found Jake eating leftover lasagna that I had made. He looked up, casual as ever. Hope you don't mind. I was starving. I stared at him for a beat too long. That was for dinner. He shrugged. Oh, my bad. No apology. Just a grin. Sophie stepped in, placing a hand on my arm. We've got frozen pizza. It's okay. It wasn't okay. But I didn't push it. Not yet. The week passed. No bags were packed. No plans were made. Jake acted like time had stopped. Like, just for a week, was a punchline only I didn't get. I came home one evening, and the armchair, my chair, was on the other side of the room. The bookshelf was pushed against a different wall. I stood there blinking, thinking, did I walk into the wrong house? Sophie came in behind me. Oh, Jake said it gave the space better flow. I turned slowly. He's rearranging my furniture now? She gave me that careful look, the one that says don't overreact. He's just trying to help. It's temporary. Everything was always temporary, until it wasn't. The final straw came that Saturday morning. I walked into the kitchen, bleary-eyed, just looking to make coffee. Jake was standing at the stove, shirtless, frying eggs in my pan with no oil, no care, just a cloud of smoke wafting into the air. He didn't look up. Hey, relax, he said. You look tense. Want some? I stared at him. No. I'd like to make my own breakfast. He finally turned, smirking. Dude, you've got to chill. You're acting like I'm squatting or something. I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. I turned, walked back to the bedroom, and closed the door behind me. Sophie sat up in bed. Everything okay? No, I said, my voice quiet but edged. I need him gone. She blinked, startled. Marcus. I gave him a week, I said. It's been nearly 2. He's disrespecting my space, my time, my patience, and you're enabling it. She didn't answer. Not right away. And that's when I knew I couldn't keep waiting for her to see it on her own. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, making a plan. I'd take a day off work. Come home early. Catch him in the act. I needed a confrontation, real and undeniable. Because clearly, being quiet hadn't worked. Jake thought I was soft. He was about to find out exactly how wrong he was. It was the lines in the carpet that finally made me admit what I'd been pretending not to feel. They weren't obvious at first, just faint indentations, marks where my coffee table used to be. Jake had moved it, said it gave the room a better vibe. What it gave me was whiplash. He didn't ask, didn't even tell me he'd done it. I came home from work one evening, briefcase still in hand, and there it was, off-center, repositioned. Like the living room had turned into one of those frat house lounges I'd sworn I'd left behind in my 20s. The change was small, but the message was loud. I looked around and realized nothing was where I'd left it. The throw pillows were in a different arrangement. The side table was missing. Later I'd find it in the hallway, stacked with empty Red Bulls. Even the thermostat had been adjusted. My home, the one I worked 12-hour days to pay for, was no longer mine. Sophie walked in behind me, smiling like nothing was wrong. Oh, Jake said it makes the room feel more open. I turned to her, slow and steady. Open for what, exactly? She hesitated. Just better flow, I guess. I didn't say what I was thinking, which was, you mean better flow for the poker table. Because that's what it had become now, his little clubhouse. It started small. A friend here, a beer there. Then one night, I walked in to find 5 strangers around my dining table, cigarette smoke curling out the back door, chips clinking in piles like I was in a damn casino. Marcus, Jake grinned from the head of the table like some deranged host. Grab a chair. We saved you a spot. I stood there for a moment, coat still on, keys in my hand, surveying the wreckage. Beer cans on the kitchen counter. The last of the lasagna gone again. My speakers blaring some EDM garbage that made the windows rattle. No thanks, I said flatly. I just got off a 12-hour shift. One of his friends chuckled like I'd made a joke. Jake just shrugged. Suit yourself. We're just blowing off steam, man. They didn't pause the game. Didn't turn down the music. Didn't even acknowledge that they were in someone else's home. That night, I stood in the hallway outside my own bathroom, waiting for it to be free because one of his friends was taking a shower. A shower. I sat on the stairs, breathing slow, hands clenched. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was invasion. The next morning, I opened the fridge and all my groceries were in different places. The eggs were gone. The oat milk, Jake's, not mine, was front and center. The seasoning cabinet was reorganized like some deranged culinary jigsaw puzzle. Sophie was sitting at the table, scrolling on her phone. Did you move the spices? I asked. No. Probably Jake. He cooked dinner last night. Cooked. In my kitchen. Using my pans. Without asking. Right, I muttered. And what was dinner? She looked up. I think he made wings. Wings, I repeated. In the cast iron skillet I use for searing? She blinked. Does it matter? I didn't answer. I just turned, walked over to the skillet, and stared at the grease still caked on the bottom. The disrespect wasn't just loud now. It was physical. Tangible. It had fingerprints and seasoning stains. Later that evening, I found Jake in the kitchen again, making a mess. Shirtless. His phone propped up on the counter playing some podcast about crypto. Hey, relax, he said before I could say a word. You always look like you just got bad news. I live here, I said, voice like stone. He grinned, like that was the joke of the year. Exactly. So relax, bro. Bro. I walked out before I lost my temper. I stood outside in the cold, hand gripping the porch railing like it might keep me from putting my fist through drywall. I called my best friend, Theo, that night. We've known each other since college, and if there's one person who doesn't sugarcoat anything, it's him. You let this guy stay 2 weeks? He asked, incredulous. In your house? Yeah. And he's rearranging your stuff? Using your kitchen? Bringing people over? Yeah. He paused. Marcus, that man's squatting. I ran a hand down my face. Sophie thinks I'm being dramatic. You're not. You're being used. There's a difference. That's when it really hit me. I'd been telling myself this was a house guest overstaying his welcome. But it wasn't that. This was a man playing house in my space, while I shrank into the background of my own life. Later that week, I overheard Jake in the hallway on the phone. His voice was low, but smug. Nah, man, he said, laughing. He won't do anything. He's too polite. Too polite. I stood in the doorway, jaw clenched so hard I felt it in my temples. I didn't confront him right then. I didn't yell or curse. But something inside me clicked into place. It wasn't rage. It was resolve. The next morning, I packed a small bag, told work I needed Friday off, and scheduled a cleaning service for Saturday. I didn't tell Sophie. Jake thought I wouldn't do anything. That I was too polite. I was about to show him exactly how wrong he was. I arrived home at 3:02 p.m. on Friday. The sun was still high, the streets still quiet, and for once, I didn't linger in my car to decompress. I parked down the block and walked the rest of the way, slow, deliberate, every step another inch closer to a boundary I had let stretch too far for too long. As I reached my porch, I heard the music before I even touched the doorknob. Deep bass, laughter, the unmistakable clatter of poker chips. I stepped inside and stopped. There they were, 5 men, 2 of whom I'd never seen before, circled around my dining table like it was a Vegas lounge. Cigarette smoke drifted through the half-open window, and beer bottles stood like trophies on every flat surface. The entire room smelled like stale nachos and body spray. Jake was at the head of the table, sunglasses on, beer in hand, like some over-the-hill frat king. When he looked up and saw me, he didn't flinch. He grinned. Yo, he called out. Surprise half-day, huh? Grab a seat, We got a spot for you. I stared at him for 2 long beats. Then I shut the door behind me. Quiet, slow, final. No, I said. Game's over. The room paused, uncertain. One of the guys, some wiry dude in a tank top, looked between us. Is everything cool? Jake chuckled. Relax, man. He's just grumpy from work. I walked toward the table. You're done, I said, voice low, clear. I gave you 2 weeks. You've pushed every boundary I've got. You have 72 hours to pack your stuff and leave. Jake laughed, nervous now, but still trying to perform for his audience. You serious right now? Dead serious. He stood up, arms wide. Come on, Marcus. Don't do this in front of everyone. I didn't blink. You chose your audience, not me. Silence. That's when Sophie walked in through the back door, tote bag in hand, and froze. She looked between us, then at the poker table, then at me. What's going on? I came home early, I said, not taking my eyes off Jake. This is what your brother thinks is acceptable. Sophie's mouth opened, then closed. Jake turned to her. He's blowing this way out of proportion. It's just a few guys, a friendly game. In a house you don't pay for, I cut in. Using furniture you didn't buy. Rearranging things that aren't yours. Cooking in a kitchen you've disrespected since day one. Disrespected, he barked. Because I made food? You told me to relax in my own kitchen, Jake. You've mocked me, laughed behind my back, eaten my groceries, and treated this place like a frat house. I've been patient, but patience and permission aren't the same thing. One of the guys stood, mumbling, yeah, I think I'm gonna bounce. The others followed quickly, grabbing keys and beers, slipping out the door with muttered goodbyes like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Jake stood alone now, red-faced and sputtering. This is unbelievable. No, I said. What's unbelievable is how long I let it go. He stormed down the hall toward the guest room. His room, slamming the door so hard a picture frame in the hallway tilted sideways. Sophie stood in the middle of it all, stunned. I turned to her, heart still thudding in my chest. I can't do this anymore, sophomore. She nodded, slow, numb. I should have said something sooner, she whispered. Yeah, I said. You should have. That night was quiet. Tense. We didn't argue. Didn't rehash it. We just sat on opposite ends of the couch, watching a show neither of us cared about. By Saturday morning, the house felt emptier. Not physically. Jake's things were still there, but emotionally. Like a storm had passed, and we were left sweeping up glass. Sophie found me in the office, vacuuming. You meant it? She asked. 72 hours? Yes, I said. And I'm not extending it. She nodded slowly. I understand. Jake left Sunday night. He didn't say goodbye. He shoved his duffel into the trunk, slammed the car door, and peeled off down the street like a teenager denied the keys. Sophie watched from the window. I didn't bother. That night, the kitchen was quiet again. I cooked alone, jazz playing low, pans exactly where I left them. The spices were back in order. The fridge wasn't full of nonsense. And I didn't have to listen to a grown man telling me to relax in the home I paid for. I stood at the counter with a plate of salmon and roasted vegetables, took one deep breath, and smiled. It was the first time I'd exhaled in weeks. Monday came, and the house felt unoccupied. Not empty, but open. Like someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been shut up too long. No more beer cans in the sink. No more footsteps at 2 a.m. No more wondering what part of my home I'd walk into and find altered, stained, or casually claimed. Jake was gone, but peace doesn't return all at once. It creeps back in through the corners, like sunlight after a long storm. And what it illuminated first was everything I hadn't said. Sophie barely spoke to me that morning. She moved slowly, her face closed off, and I could tell she was somewhere between relief and grief. That's the part they never tell you about setting boundaries. You don't just lose the problem. Sometimes you lose people who weren't ready to see it as a problem. We sat across from each other at the kitchen island. I sipped my coffee. She stared into hers. He left late last night, she said, her voice tight. I know, I replied. I heard the door. She nodded. Didn't say anything. Didn't expect him to. Another silence. Heavy, but honest. The backlash came fast. Not from Jake, but from Sophie's family. First it was her sister, Claire. Marcus, I heard Jake had to leave suddenly. What happened? Then their mother. I just think it's sad. He was going through something, and instead of support, he got pushed out. Pushed out. Those words settled in my chest like cold lead. Not because they were true, but because they were so wildly off base it made my skin crawl. I didn't push him out. I reclaimed what was already mine. I tried explaining it to Sophie, laying it out calmly, logically, piece by piece. But it was hard to reach her through the fog of guilt she was still wading through. "You didn't even give him a warning," she said one night, folding laundry that hadn't moved in a week. I looked up from the couch. I gave him 8 weeks. But no final conversation. No chance to talk it through. What would have changed, Sophie? He knew he was over the line. He just didn't care. She didn't answer, just kept folding. So I laid it bare. If this happens again, if he shows up a year from now with another sad story, I'm not going to play the reasonable guy anymore. I won't be silent for 2 months while someone wrecks my home and mocks me in it. She finally looked at me. "Are you saying I have to choose?" I paused. "No," I said. "I'm saying I already did. I chose me. I chose us. But I'm not going to live in a house where I'm disrespected just because it's easier to keep the peace." That was the line. Spoken out loud. Firm and final. She didn't respond. But she didn't walk away either. 2 nights later, I heard her on the phone with Jake. Her voice was low, but not soft. She was explaining, clearly, carefully, that she supported him, but that his behavior in our home had consequences. That I wasn't the villain. That we were trying to rebuild. I didn't listen to every word, but I heard enough. She was finally choosing too. The next day, Sophie came into the office. My office again now, not Jake's crash pad. She sat in the chair across from my desk, hands in her lap. "He's hurt," she said. "But I think deep down, he knows he crossed the line." I just nodded. "And I think I've been protecting him my whole life," she added quietly, "even when he didn't deserve it." That landed. I stood, walked around the desk, and sat next to her on the window bench. We didn't speak for a while. We just looked out at the street. "You didn't deserve that pressure," I said eventually. "It's not your job to carry everyone. Neither is yours," she said. We both laughed, soft, tired, but real. That weekend, I cleaned the house top to bottom. Not because it was dirty, but because I needed to reclaim it. Room by room, object by object. The armchair went back in its rightful place. The spices were resorted. I even scrubbed the oven, which had been coated with God knows what since Jake's wings experiment. By the end of Sunday, the house was breathing again. And so was I. They didn't waste time. By Monday morning, the group texts were lighting up like a house fire. First it was Sophie's sister, Claire, again, passive, nosy, playing mediator like it was her job. I just think maybe Marcus could have handled things with more compassion. Then her cousin Jenna jumped in. "Jake's been through a lot." He said he felt ambushed. Ambushed. That word hit a nerve. Because in their version of the story, I was the aggressor. The uptight control freak who couldn't handle one messy house guest. They didn't see the weeks of quiet swallowing, the dozen times I bit my tongue, the hours I worked late just to avoid coming home to chaos. They didn't live it. Sophie read the messages quietly, standing over the kitchen counter like she was studying for an exam. I waited to see if she'd defend me. Say something. Anything. She didn't. She just put her phone down, walked over to the sink, and began rinsing a mug. I sat on the couch, fingers tapping the armrest, heart pounding harder than it should have. "You believe them?" I finally asked. She didn't turn around. "I believe Jake's hurt." "That's not what I asked." Silence. "Sophie," I said slower now, "do you think I was wrong to set that boundary?" She looked over her shoulder, face torn. "I think you had every right to ask him to leave. But I think how you did it was the only way it was going to work." I cut in. He wasn't going to leave. Not with the talk. Not with a heads up. He needed a hard stop. She nodded slowly. "I know. But that wasn't agreement. It was resignation." The next call came from her mother. I didn't answer. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, Marcus. I just wanted to say I know you probably thought you were doing the right thing. But family's about more than just rules and timing. Sometimes it's about bending. Giving a little grace." Grace. They kept using that word like it was something I hadn't already given too much of. Grace without accountability isn't kindness. It's permission. And Jake had cashed in every drop of grace we had left. I let Sophie listen to the voicemail on her own. She didn't say much after. Just a soft, She means well. But I was done decoding subtext. Done trying to earn the approval of people who never paid the price of the decisions they were so eager to judge. Midweek, Jake made his final move. A post on Facebook. A moody photo. Some vague quote. Funny how people turn on you the moment you're inconvenient. He didn't tag me. He didn't have to. The comments were full of sympathy. You deserve better. Stay strong, bro. Some people don't understand loyalty. I stared at the screen for a long time. He wasn't just telling his side. He was rewriting the story. Sophie saw it too. She said nothing, just sighed and walked away. That night, I poured myself a whiskey and sat out on the back porch with my thoughts. I thought about how easily people decide who the villain is, how all it takes is one good sob story and a few convenient omissions. I didn't need to defend myself. Not anymore. But I didn't need to know that Sophie was still with me. When she finally came out, wrapped in a hoodie, she sat beside me in silence. After a long moment, she said, I told my mom to stop. I looked at her. Stop what? Stop implying you did something wrong. That mattered more than she probably realized. She looked over at me. You did what I couldn't. I hate how it happened. But I hate even more that I let it go that long. I exhaled slowly, tension easing from my chest like air from a balloon. I just want us to protect our home, I said. Not from people we don't know. From the ones who think they're entitled to it. She nodded. From now on, we do that together. That word, together, it felt heavier now. Earned. By the weekend, things had shifted. Sophie wasn't speaking to Jake. Not because I asked her to, but because she finally saw what he did to the life we'd built. The family text slowed down. People moved on to the next drama. But I knew the lines had been drawn. Some relationships would never go back to what they were. And that was okay. Not every connection is worth salvaging just because it shares blood. On Sunday, I went to Home Depot, bought paint, and finally repainted the guest room. Sophie helped. We laughed a little when we spilled primer on the floor. It's not a guest room anymore, I said. It's the music room. She smiled. Ours. Ours. It's strange how reclaiming a space starts with the little things. The house was quiet now. Not empty, not cold, just still. No beer cans tucked behind the couch cushions. No game controllers left in the sink like they belonged there. No music thumping at midnight. No strangers asking if I had more toilet paper. Just stillness. The kind of stillness I used to take for granted. I stood in the middle of the guest room. No, the music room now, with a paint roller in one hand, streaks of sage green on my forearm, and this unfamiliar feeling in my chest. Not pride exactly, more like relief. The deep, cellular kind that sits between your ribs and whispers, you're finally safe again. Sophie sat on the floor behind me, wiping sweat off her neck with an old rag. Her hair was pulled back, her jeans stained with primer, and she looked exhausted, but lighter, like we'd both been carrying a weight we didn't realize until it was gone. She reached for the half-empty paint tray and said, You know he was never planning to leave, right? I paused, turned to her. Yeah, I said. I know. She didn't say it with bitterness. More like a confession. An admission she wasn't ready to make until the dust had fully settled. I kept thinking, if I just gave him enough time, enough patience, he'd realize he was overstepping, she said. But he never did. He just kept taking. That's what takers do, I said. They don't stop until someone makes them. We worked in silence for a while, both of us absorbed in the rhythm of reclaiming. Every brush stroke felt like a declaration. This room is ours now. This house is ours again. Later that evening, I sat in the kitchen alone, eating leftovers, jazz humming low from the Bluetooth speaker. The lights were soft. The dishes were clean. My favorite mug sat next to me. Introverts unite, separately, uncracked, untouched. For the first time in months, I felt like I could exhale without watching the clock, without wondering who'd walk in or what part of my home would be reshaped while I was gone. This peace. I'd earned it. I didn't care who said otherwise. The family hadn't reached out again since the voicemail. Not Sophie's mom. Not Claire. Not even Jake. Especially not Jake. He'd gone radio silent. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a passive-aggressive echo chamber of curated Instagram posts and vague captions. Not everyone deserves your story. You find out who's really there when you have nothing. Your glow-up will be their karma. I laughed when Sophie showed me one. Not out of pettiness, just disbelief. He's acting like we lit his car on fire, I said. Sophie shook her head. He always knew how to make himself the victim. That's how he survives. That's how he keeps people from calling him out. I leaned back in my chair and said the thing that had been sitting in my gut for weeks. Maybe I didn't just kick him out. Maybe I broke the fantasy. She looked at me, brow raised. He lived in this version of the world where consequences didn't apply to him, where he could float between couches and bad decisions without ever facing the fallout. I ended that. And people like Jake? They don't forgive you for pulling back the curtain. Sophie nodded slowly. No, they don't. But I'd rather lose the illusion than live in a lie. A few days later, I was in the garage organizing boxes when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel, Sophie's cousin. The only person from her side who hadn't weighed in publicly. Just wanted to say I heard what happened. And for what it's worth, I would have done the same thing. It was one sentence, but it meant more than he probably realized. Not all bridges were burned. Some were just rerouted. Claire sent a neutral message 2 weeks later. Nothing dramatic. Just a hey, hope you and Sophie are doing well. Sophie saw it first. She turned to me, unsure. Should I respond? You can, I said. Just don't apologize. She didn't. She replied kindly, but firmly. And that was the beginning of a new tone. No more tiptoeing. No more explaining ourselves like we were guilty of something. We weren't. We were just done being uncomfortable in our own home to make someone else feel comfortable ignoring theirs. That Sunday, Sophie and I finally did something we hadn't done since Jake moved in. We invited people over. Just 2 close friends. Wine. Good food. Vinyl spinning on the turntable. Laughter that didn't sound forced. I caught Sophie watching me during dinner, smiling in this quiet, appreciative way. What? I asked. She leaned in, chin resting on her hand. You look lighter. I didn't need a mirror to know she was right. Because this moment right here, was what the house used to feel like. Before it was hijacked. Before I started doubting whether I was allowed to be uncomfortable in my own kitchen. After they left, we cleaned up in silence, moving around each other in sync, like we were back to normal. Except it wasn't the old normal. It was better, clearer, stronger. A few nights later, Sophie got a call from Jake. I only knew because I saw his name flash across her screen while she was sitting on the couch next to me. She hesitated, then declined the call. He wants to talk, she said softly. About what? I don't know. Probably to spin things again. Maybe to apologize. Or maybe just to say I abandoned him. I nodded. You don't owe him anything. I know, she said. But I don't hate him. I just don't trust him. That's fair, I said. Trust isn't loyalty. It's earned. We didn't talk about it again. She didn't call him back. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and stood at the back window, looking out over the yard. The air was cool, crisp. The grass was damp from last night's rain, and the world felt paused, like it was holding its breath, just for a second. I took a sip from my mug and let it all wash over me. The discomfort, the confrontation, the fallout, and finally, the stillness. It hadn't been easy. I'd lost some things in the process. Respect from people who never respected me to begin with. Comfort with Sophie's family. The illusion that silence was safety. But what I gained was better. Peace. Pride. And a home that felt like mine again. Final lines. I used to think boundaries were about fences. Lines. Rules. But they're not. They're mirrors. They show you who people really are, and what they do when you finally say no. Jake didn't like what he saw. And maybe some of Sophie's family didn't either. But I saw myself clearly. For the first time in a long time. And I was proud of the man looking back at me. If you've ever had to set a boundary that made you the villain in someone else's story, you're not alone. Sometimes protecting your peace means being misunderstood. Drop a comment if you've had to reclaim your space, even when it cost you comfort. Let's talk about what it takes to choose clarity over chaos.